and the person's brain is still working. However, if you shine a light into the eye and there's no response, no change in the size of the pupils, then the person's brain is no longer functional and you can declare him as brain dead. So how does this all-important pupil reflex work? Well, to understand the pupil reflex, we need to understand the structure of the iris. Now the iris, which is the circular sheet of muscles that surround the pupil, the iris actually contains two sets of involuntary muscles. So let me just draw it out for you first. So I'm going to draw, this is the iris, and here is the pupil in the center. You can imagine the white of the eye here. This is the white part of the eye, here's the iris, here's the pupil. Now the iris contains two sets of involuntary muscles. The first set are the radial muscles, which are represented by these lines in blue. So they radiate outwards from the pupil. The second set of muscles is called the circular muscles. So the circular muscles are represented by the pink lines. They are arranged in circles. Alright, so you've got the circular muscles and you've got the radial muscles. And the important thing is they are antagonistic muscles. Alright, they are antagonistic muscles, which means that when one set of muscles contracts, the other set of muscles relax. Right, we've seen this before, antagonistic muscles, whether in peristalsis, we've seen this before also in our breathing, right, the external and internal intercostal muscles. And again, we see antagonistic muscles here. In this case, the radial and circular muscles are antagonistic and they work together to control the pupil size. So what happens in different environments? Let's take a look. So firstly, in very bright light conditions, what happens to the pupils? Let's think about it. When there's a lot of light around you, how will your eye adjust? Well, it will adjust to reduce the size of the pupil, right? Make the size of the pupil smaller because it's already very bright outside. We don't need the pupils to be so large. So the pupils will be reduced in size. Right, so in order to do this, the circular muscles of the iris will contract. So these circular ones will contract and the radial muscles will relax. Right, so these radial muscles, they will relax, so they lengthen, right? So they are longer. And as a result, we say that the pupil will constrict. Right, so let's use the word constrict, not shrink or grow smaller. But the pupil will constrict, and this reduces the amount of light that enters the eye. Now, of course, this is very important, right? Because if too much light enters your eye, then it could damage your eye, it could damage your retina, and cause problems in the future. And then what happens then in dim light? Right, what happens in dim light? For example, when you walk into a dark room. Well, in this case, there's very little light around in the environment. So your eye will adjust to cause the pupil to dilate, right? To cause the pupil to be larger, to allow more light into the eye so that you can see clearly. So in order to do this, the circular muscles will now relax, right? Circular muscles relax. And this time, the radial muscles will contract. Right, so it's easy to remember because the radial muscles contract, they become shorter, and so the pupil becomes larger, and we say that the pupil dilates, and this increases the amount of light that can enter the eye, and hence helps you to see in dim light. Alright, we're going to end off by looking at how the nervous system coordinates the pupil reflex. So we're going to take a look at the reflex arc for the pupil reflex, right? The pathway which the nerve impulses travel to produce the pupil reflex. So it starts here, right, with the light that enters your eye, right? And then when there's a change in the light intensity, right, we call that the stimulus, right? The change in light intensity. Right, so you need to also recall the parts of your reflex arc with the stimulus. And then next we have the receptor. So in this case, what is the receptor? And the receptor is the retina, right? The layer of light-sensitive photoreceptors in the retina. These are your receptors. Okay, they will detect the stimulus, and then there will be a sensory neuron, right, which will carry the nerve impulse from the receptor through the optic nerve to the brain, right? In this case, remember that it's in the brain because it's a cranial reflex, right? Because the eyes are in the head region. So there's a relay neuron in the brain, okay, the sensory neuron synapses on it. Then the relay neuron synapses on the motor neuron. And the motor neuron will transmit nerve impulses from the relay neuron in the brain to the effector. In this case, what is the effector? The pupil reflex, the effector is the iris, or the iris muscles, right? The circular and the radial muscles. Right? So the nerve impulses will be sent to your circular and radial muscles, causing them to either contract or relax in order to change the size of the pupil. Okay, that wraps up this video. We have seen how the amount of light entering the eye is controlled, right, by changing the size of the pupil. And we've seen how the pupil reflex works and how the nervous system coordinates it, right? What are the receptors, the effectors, and so on. Okay, so I'll see you in the next lesson.